So you take on a project like a kitchen remodel. What kind of power tools are you going to bring? My way of thinking, bring as many as you have. You never know what you're going to run into. So I'll go over kind of what I brought here. My old Craftsman miter saw, had this for years. Couple of drill drivers, couple of impacts. Gotta have a saber saw. Gotta have the Sawzall, right? Circle saw, palm sander. Gotta have a jigsaw. Router. Couple of belt sanders. You gonna drill into concrete? Should have a hammer drill. Need to plane down some boards? Need a little hand planer. And then over here, this little thing, this little oscillating tool, gotta have one of those. Same thing with this Milwaukee circle saw. That thing is super nice. Brand new trim nailer. Never even used it yet, but it's gonna get used. Had to bring the electric framing nailer, of course. And in this bag, there's 4 air nailers all the way from the framing nailer to a stapler. Now, do you need all these tools? Yeah, you probably will. I've used almost all of these on this little project. And if you don't have them, you can always rent them. You might want to buy a few. These are all handy tools to have around. So, I gotta get back to work. So you start a project like this, right? So I figured, bring a pair of work boots, a pair of knocking around shoes. That's all a guy should need, right? So after a couple days on the job, yeah, look what happened. Both of them. And I like these boots. Lace up nice and tight. They got the side zipper, little Velcro closure. And I think working so fast like I do, I built up too much heat on the sole and the glue let go. Now some of you might say, Dish, maybe you should just lose a few pounds. Maybe that's what did it. Possibility. So my last trip to Home Depot, swung into the mall, picked up these DeWalt's. They were on sale, looked pretty comfy, hard-toed. Gonna be my new work shoe on this job. Now you can't always bring every tool with you. One of the things I thought I might need, but couldn't bring, was a table saw. I have a couple at home. They're big, they're heavy. They're not made to put in the back of the truck by yourself. So I started looking around. I was thinking about getting just a small tabletop model. Once I started looking, the ones with the stands, the wheels, they fold up, seemed a little more logical. And different models, different makes. I went with the Ridgid. Seemed to be a little more heavy duty. It's a little bigger. Lifetime warranty on parts. Also, it was on sale. And you know, when you're buying tools on sale, it's like making money. So we'll get this Ridgid put together, put it through its paces, see how it does. This is the R4514 model, and it went together pretty simple. A lot of the parts are numbered. Number 1 goes in number 1, number 2 into 2, and so on. You'll need a ratchet, couple sockets. Comes with a couple Allen wrenches to hold the heads. Pretty simple process. Folds down. Seems like a pretty good saw. Now it's just time to rip some boards through it. See how it does there. So this board is going to cap off the end of a wall, but it was just a touch wide. All I needed to take off here was just 1/8 of an inch, but it needed it. That worked out fine. But as I was going through, this guard has to be up so high, that blade has to be up so high. So right now that blade is up probably over 2 inches to clear the guard to get a board through. Just something I'm not used to, but it'll work. This board was in the scrap pile, 70% off at Home Depot. Worked fine for me. One of the edges was all chipped up. That's what I just cut off. So sometimes you can get some deals in the scrap pile. Scrap for some people, not scrap for others, especially tightwads like me. So that cut all right. You could tell this smaller unit doesn't have the power of maybe a full-size table saw, but I guess you probably wouldn't expect that either. And the guard, it was kind of binding when that first came through. You got to keep that blade so high for it to get through that guard. I always like the top of that blade, you know, just that 1/8 or 1/4 over the top of your wood. But with this setup, you got to be quite a bit higher. It works. Unfortunately, a lot of times stuff like this just gets taken off by people. I'm gonna try and leave it on. It's tough to cut narrow stuff with this on there, but it works. Overall, pretty good saw. Very happy with it. One of the things I have a lot of in this project is trim to cut. So if you're going to use a chop saw like this, the first thing you're going to want to do is change the blade from the original. Like this saw, it came with a pretty rough blade, good for dimensional lumber, other things. But if you're going to cut trim, put a fine trim blade on this. It's just the little things sometimes that helps. Also, make sure your saw is cutting square. Make sure your angles are true. If it might need a little adjustment, give it a little fine tuning. All that makes a difference in your final product. As you come into the trim stage of a project, especially with crown molding, yeah, you got to take your time, kind of figure out what you're going to do. So practicing on maple trim, pre-painted, not the way to go. So what I did is went to Home Depot. I bought some pre-painted pine, less expensive. For practicing, making some samples, this is probably your better option. So what I did is made an outside corner, labeled it, inside corner, and labeled them. That way, when you come across a certain corner you have to make, right? You know how to set up your saw because you have a practice piece. Put it in your saw, turn that angle, you know it's going to be right. Something else is just putting some tape on your bed here. When you throw your finished piece in there, you don't want it scuffed up, marked up. Also, take your pencil or a marking pen, where that is, and mark that. So every time you put a piece in there, it's in the exact same spot. And practice a little bit. Crown molding's not that difficult. You just got to take a little time. And when you do your measurements, draw it on a piece of paper with that angle. Go to your saw. You got some parts. Get them set up right. It actually goes pretty good. A lot of times you'll have trouble with them inside corners trying to 45 them. Because with the drywall, mud, different things, yeah, it's probably not 90 degrees. You cut 245s, you stick them in there and you look at it, it's like, oh, that ain't good. Sometimes the better thing to do is to cope those. That way, if you're off a little bit, you'll never notice it. So the first thing to cope, get your length and then cut a 45 on that. Because you got to follow that edge now with your coping saw. Even take your pencil lead, run it along there, and you'll have a nice line to follow. So I got the coping saw. Let's cope this out. Now this is a longer piece I can clamp down. If you've got shorter pieces that you need, take it out of a long piece. Make your cope, make sure it fits good, cut it off. If you need to 45 the other end, outside corner, cut it off, whatever. But start with a longer piece, something you can clamp down and hold still. Make a nice cut. You make that 45 because that's the profile of the piece of trim you have. Works on quarter round, this base, crown molding, almost everything, it works. Just follow that line. And what that does then is once you're in your inside corner, even if that's off a little bit, it still looks like it's tight. This is the best way to do it, but it takes practice. Get yourself some scrap trim before you start. Make a few copes. You can figure it out. It's not that difficult to do. And there's videos out there showing step by step. Take a look. Coping. Give it a shot. So having your piece that you're going to cope clamp solid sure helps. Another thing, little piece of sandpaper. If you missed a little spot or come off the line a little bit, little piece of sandpaper to clean that up. Something else, run your saw through there at a little bit of an angle so your cope comes to almost a point. That way, if there's more variation in your corner, it'll still be tight in the front.